Caitlin Clark is once again where I want to start, because Caitlin Clark seems to be that all that anybody can talk about. Her, Angel Reese, the WNBA, all these things, people just keep pounding away at. It is a lead topic on almost every show that I tune into. Caitlin Clark is the most polarizing athlete we have seen since Tim Tebow. Everyone had an opinion on Tim Tebow, and like Caitlin Clark, Tim Tebow collided or made people collide with one of the two things people don't like to talk about. Tim Tebow made people discuss religion, just like how Caitlin Clark is making people talk about race. Okay? And it's a little uncomfortable, right? Like, I watch people on these national shows, and even I myself, there's moments where I'm like, I really don't want to talk about this because it's an uncomfortable thing. Okay, like there are certain things in life that mix really well, like, vodka and orange juice, just, a simple little thing that people like to mix. But there's definitely things that don't mix, like religion and sports or politics and sports. It's something that people like to stay away from, including myself. And when I think about Tim Tebow and just everything that happened with him, he makes people discuss, religion and sports. And it was something that we didn't talk about that much at the time. But Tim Tebow was so polarizing, and he was such a good athlete, and people loved him or hated him so much that people had to discuss it. Right. And so I would wake up in the morning, and I never forget, turn it on First Take, back in its heyday when it was Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless. And that's all that they talked about. That's all any sports people really talked about. And that's a media-driven thing. It wasn't Tim Tebow's fault. But once again, he was so polarizing that people had to talk about him, just like how Caitlin Clark is so polarizing that people have to talk about her. And when it came to Tim Tebow, the people that loved him tended to be Christians, and the people that didn't love him tended to not be Christians, right? He was a huge deal at Florida, right? He wins the Heisman, and he wins a couple national titles under Urban Meyer, and he was awesome. And then, he finished his career, and it's I don't think he's going to be that great of an NFL quarterback. And then he gets drafted in the first round by the Broncos. And people weren't happy with that pick because he didn't look like an NFL quarterback. In his career, 47% completion percentage in the NFL proved that to be true. And I'll never forget, in college, he would wear the eye black with the Bible verses on him. And, there are some people who loved that. There were some people who didn't love that. And he gets to the NFL, and the NFL's like, you're not doing that. Like we don't let guys do that here. And people were outraged, or they absolutely loved it. And that kind of started the whole Tim Tebow in the NFL thing. A friendly conversation of this dude's a great football player turned into something that was more than just about football, right? And then the Broncos start the season, and he's not playing, and so things kind of die down a little bit. And then the Broncos are so bad that you know what? Let's throw Tim Tebow out there. And they do, and he starts winning all these games. Okay, I can still hear Skip Bayless saying, all Tim Tebow does is win games. I don't care about the numbers. They continuously find a way to win. Long story short, he ends up helping the Broncos make the playoffs for the first time since 2005. He even won a playoff game against the Steelers. And people either loved it or hated it. There was no in between, right? And it was such a story. Tim Tebow was such a big deal that the media beats the ever-living daylights out of Tim Tebow topics. Okay, they did. And we are on a very similar path with Caitlin Clark. Okay, we are heading in this direction where it's all that people want to talk about. These, me included, I feel like I've talked about it every day for the past month. That's not true, but that's just what it feels like. Me, the media, we are beating these Caitlin Clark topics into the ground to a point where people are going to grow sick and tired of hearing about it. Very similar to how people grew sick and tired of hearing about Tim Tebow during all the Tebow mania stuff, right? I'll be honest, I'm already sick of talking about Caitlin Clark. We're only 51 days past when she was drafted, but she has a very similar grip on the sports world that Tim Tebow had his rookie season in the NFL when they went on that run. And as of right now, seems like the sports world's fine with it. Okay, like people seem fine talking about the WNBA and Caitlin Clark as much as they are right now. And I would say that in today's world versus, a decade ago, people are much more willing to discuss things like race and sports. But this is the first time we've discussed it from a white person's perspective, which is kind of uncomfortable, right? Like the only other sports racial topic that I can really think of was the whole Colin Kaepernick episode. Okay. And as crazy as that was, he didn't get nearly as much play as Caitlin Clark is getting right now. And speaking of Colin Kaepernick, if Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco gets hurt, maybe the Colts could sign him. I don't know. It seems like every time a quarterback gets hurt, Colin Kaepernick releases a workout video. It's actually kind of funny. But even with that, though, he wasn't covered the same way that Tim Tebow or the way that Tim Tebow was or the way that Caitlin Clark is currently being covered. I mean, from the moment Caitlin Clark was drafted, really from the moment we knew that she declared for the WNBA, like we knew she was going to be the main topic everywhere, and she was. Okay, they're talking about her on news shows. Like it's not just on ESPN or FS1 or Indy Sports Take. Like they're talking about her everywhere. And right now, that is a good thing for the WNBA. But if you're the WNBA, like yes, they're like there's this very positive outlook of like people are actually talking about the league. Like it's NBA Finals week, and I've seen shows like The Herd, First Take, the Pat McAfee show, like these major national shows do more topics on Caitlin Clark than they have on the NBA Finals. Like that, this is abnormal. This has never happened before. And as of right now, this is a good thing for the WNBA. Like I think we all knew that Caitlin Clark was going to be a story when she got to the WNBA, but if you told me that the national media would spend more time on her this week than the NBA Finals, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have laughed in your face. And as of right now, like it's a good thing for the WNBA. But at what point does this become annoying? Okay, too much of a good thing, like it's not a good thing. Okay, like if you eat too much cookie dough in one sitting, you're going to throw up eventually. And then you aren't even going to want to look at, the cookie dough for several weeks. Okay, don't ask me how I know that. My point still stands, though. At what point do people get Caitlin Clark fatigue? Everyone, even the people that love Tim Tebow at the height of Tebow mania, got worn out by the constant coverage. Like every time you turned on ESPN or Fox Sports or Fox News or whatever, Tim Tebow was in your face. And that wears on people. When does that happen with Caitlin Clark? At what point do consumers get tired of discussing Caitlin Clark and the parts of her story that don't involve basketball? Like that's the most taxing part about this is that most of the discussion isn't even about the basketball. It's about all the other stuff that sports fans don't really care about. Okay, if Caitlin Clark finds her game, she starts dropping, 25-point, double doubles, then I think that the conversation will be fine. But as of right now, that's not happening. And part of why the Tim Tebow conversation became taxing over the course of time was because it wasn't always about football. Okay, it could often become about other things like religion. Okay, conversation about politics, religion, and race, especially in the world of sports, aren't always the most desired topics by the audience. And that's why I do what I can to stay away from it. But at some point, like you have to bring it up in this Caitlin Clark conversation. You do. All right. And it's not her fault. Okay. Like I'm sure that she doesn't like how people are turning this into a race thing. I'm assuming that she just wants for people to talk about how she plays basketball. Just like I'm sure that Tim Tebow only wanted people to discuss the way that he played football. That just isn't how it works with the media. So when Caitlin Clark fatigue settles in, because it's going to happen. Once again, like we are 51 days past her being drafted number 1 overall, and I feel like it's all that we talked about. I feel like it's all that I've talked about. So what is the WNBA going to do when that Caitlin Clark fatigue settles in? Like for the NFL, Tim Tebow fatigue wasn't a big deal because they had plenty of stars outside of Tim Tebow that they could then just push to the forefront and be like, hey, pay attention to these dudes. Here's the other thing. The height of Tim Tebow mania came during the playoffs. So once he got bounced, it was like, okay, he's gone. Like he's out of the frame now. Talk about these other guys because we know that you care about those other guys as well. The NFL had multiple stars outside of Tim Tebow that they could have pushed. The WNBA doesn't have that. They don't have that. The majority of people, once again, this thing that these WNBA players don't understand, most of the people tuning in, watching the WNBA care about Caitlin Clark. They don't care about the rest of the league. Not yet, right? I'm sure that there's a desire for the WNBA that like they've pushed all these Caitlin Clark games so early so that they could get her in multiple places, and people wanting to watch Caitlin Clark could also watch the other players in the league that are good. Okay, but here's the thing: like Caitlin Clark hasn't been around long enough for those other players to become stars yet. So what is the WNBA going to do when people get sick and tired of Caitlin Clark? Because it's coming, right? And I know that the WNBA, like they've already sold the tickets. Okay, like they've already rented the bigger arenas to to compensate for all the people coming in to want to watch her play. I understand that all that's happened, but here's the thing: leagues don't make money off of ticket sales. They don't. We learned this during COVID. The leagues make money off of television deals. The NBA is about to get paid $6 billion with a B, $6 billion on their latest television deal. That is how these leagues make money. Okay, they need you and they need me to watch at home, right? Because then they can sell ads, and that's really how they make a lot of their money. Like the WNBA needs for Caitlin Clark to continue, because they need her to continue to be appointment television. And if the national media continues to ostentatiously put Caitlin Clark on display as one of the main topics on their shows day in and day out, they are eventually going to push the audience away. At some point, we're going to be like, you know what? I'm good. I don't want this anymore. I just want to talk basketball. I'm sick of all these underlying narratives that we have to dance around whenever we talk about Caitlin Clark. It's coming. It's going to happen. We saw the exact same thing happen with Tim Tebow, and the NFL and these national media outlets. They called a break because of the timing of when it happened. Because it was during the playoffs when Tim Tebow lost, they would be like, all right, man, we're done with you. But the following year, he came right back up, but we had a break from him. And so it was fine. With Caitlin Clark, there's no break coming. We've got the rest of the summer into the fall. Okay, like we're a quarter of the way through the WNBA season. Some of the Fever are, at least. The rest of the teams aren't. That's what I want to see. What is the WNBA going to do when people like you and me get sick and tired of seeing Caitlin Clark? Because I'll be honest with you, I think I'm there. If I'm not there yet, I'm really close, right? It's I sit around, I'm like, what am I supposed to talk about today? Oh, I guess I'm supposed to talk about Caitlin Clark because she's the only interesting thing happening right now. So those are my thoughts. What comes next for the WNBA when Caitlin Clark, when she wears on people, when people are tired of seeing her face? What does the WNBA do? It'll be interesting. I think that they'll just kind of fall back into oblivion where people don't really care. That's what's probably going to wind up happening. So we'll see what happens there. Something else I'm interested to see, Adonai Mitchell. What's he going to do this year? The second round pick for the Indianapolis Colts, in this year's NFL draft. He addressed the media for the first time yesterday since being drafted, and I like what I heard from him. It sounded good. He doesn't sound much of like an idiot. I've got that audio for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.